All right, sports fans. Today is another special episode of Sports for All. And on the program, on the podcast, I am honored. And, it's not every day where your guest is an Emmy Award winner and conquering the seven highest summits in the world. That's one highest summit per continent. So, on the program, Mark Patterson. Thank you for joining us, Mark.
Thank you very much. I know that we talked about this before about you being and broadcasting from New Zealand. I'm in Sun Valley, Idaho. I've been to New Zealand. I've been on the South Island. I've been on the North Island. I hitchhiked my way all the way from Queenstown all the way
Mhm.
back to Auckland, which is one of the greatest challenges of my entire life. But I love the country and I appreciate you having me on the pod.
You're welcome. All the pleasure is mine. Again, I'd like to say it's an honor to have you on the episode. All right, let's get right into it. You you host a podcast of your own
Mhm.
called Finding Your Summit.
Yeah.
And when did this all begin? What was your thought process like?
In terms of the podcast, just because of my background playing in the NFL, climbing mountains all over the world, running Sports Illustrated, I get to know a lot of people and a lot of people that are in the public eye, and they've become friends of mine. And so I just start throwing it out there. I don't know, it was 5 or 6 years ago. I've got almost 300 episodes. For about a year and a half, I took a break. I just needed to take a big breath, trying to crank out 4 podcasts a week. And I did that for like 4 years in a row. It's a lot. And
Yeah.
so taking a time out and taking a breath and just resetting, is this something I want to do? And so I jumped in back into it about 6 months ago and just picked kind of right back up from where I left off. And it just continues to be super fulfilling because I get to not only interview people but also get interviewed by others. Of course, that's about some of my other accomplishments. I also just finished a book called Finding Your Summit.
Hmm.
It's got the same name
Yeah.
as the podcast, but at the end of the day, uh, I think it's so metaphorical because everybody's got their own summit and it's all different. It doesn't have to be mine. It doesn't have to be about mountains. It's just whatever challenges out there that you want to go and try to accomplish, it's all within reach and we just have to get after it in a certain way.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. The gig with Sports Illustrated, you multiplied. You were able to multiply the
Mhm.
viewers on the digital platform. Correct?
Well, I started
Yeah.
on Sports Illustrated. I started a team site network, which other
Yeah.
people have done, but I did it completely different. I thought differently, and I did so really out of necessity. And so when I started it, I started with zero. I mean, I
Okay.
created this, so it went from zero, and we took it to over 1 billion page views,
Mhm.
which is almost
Yeah.
impossible to absolutely do. And I did it by again thinking differently and really asking the question why, and how has journalism changed over these different years? And a lot of it has to do with cell phones. It has the way that we receive information, and the way that our brains have now gotten used to really absorbing information coming in. We're more like in bite-sized pieces, not in column after column after column, which newspapers do. The old columnists, you'd sit there for an hour and read the newspaper and catch up
Mm.
on who won the game from the night before. And now it's just changed, and so nobody had like shifted to that change, and I did, and it became very sticky, and that's how we got to 1 billion page views.
And was there anything innovative that you tried successfully that you tried successfully? Anything? Was there anything? Was there any innovation uh,
Yeah.
you put into it?
Yeah, so the innovation really again about thinking differently is
Hmm.
that it was really more about creating like for example, I stood up a channel in every single market. So in the NFL we have, and I know you don't have all these teams in New Zealand,
Yeah.
but in the NFL or Major League Baseball or the NBA or um, just college football, things like that.
Yeah.
And so every university. And so what I had every publisher do is write stories that were 250 to 500 words just to make it short and sweet and tight. It's just no different than when you're looking at your phone and you have
Mm-hmm.
these notifications, right? It has to be a certain character headline that's going to be catchy. It's not going to be clickbait. That's going to
Yeah.
have high SEO value. And then always accompany every single article with a 1 to 3 minute video and do that multiple times a day. And that turned out to be the magic formula. And it shifted a little bit over time, but more or less that was what the part of the formula was to really help elevate us.
In it, NFL athletes are some of the best conditioned in the world. And being a former NFL player, how physically was that helpful to you in conquering the seven summits?
Well, I mean, obviously it was a major deal. And I think one of
Mhm.
the things that I always kind of grew up as a gym rat, and that was kind of my DNA.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be physically fit. And what happens with a lot of NFL guys is because not just the time my time in the NFL, which was 5 years, but also playing Major League College football, which is another 5 years. That's 10 years of hardcore athletics and grind. And a lot of times, and many times, my former teammates and former players just they get to the end and they're like, I'm not doing this anymore, and they just lose kind of that drive and that desire to work out at that kind of level. And for whatever reason, I just never stopped, right? And so I've carried that with me to today, this morning. I've already worked out for an hour and a half, and I'll do another an hour and a half this afternoon. I normally go 3 hours a day, and that's just normal. And so what ended up happening is when I was going through this bad patch 10 years ago, and I decided to take on this massive goal to become the first NFL player to climb the seven summits. And you said before, the highest peaks on each continent. I didn't have to get in shape. I was already in shape.
Yeah.
But now I had to take it to a different level and learn other skill sets like how to climb out of a crevasse and how to hydrate at high altitude, how to pressure breathe when the air is getting really thin in the death
Mhm.
zone, things like that.
Yeah.
And so it was more just different conditioning, but physically fit, I was already there.
In the seven summits that you climbed, was there even a modicum, a tiny thing of self-doubt, or was there ever a time where you were telling yourself, I may have bit more than I chewed?
No.
No, there was no.
I
Okay.
every all these things I've done, and like I like in when I first got into college, it took me some years to really understand how to build my body and my mind and my
Mhm.
soul into um, kind of a championship mindset of going after goals, achieving them, visualizing them. And I didn't visualize, and so I had that going with me in terms of my best asset is my God-given ability in staying in shape and the physicality and outlasting most people and
Yeah.
what they do. And I only envisioned success. I didn't envision anything else. It's just like
Hmm.
I don't just like when I was trying to get in the NFL, like I don't know who's getting cut, but it's not going to be me. I only envisioned me sitting there on that day and I was going to be there and I envisioned myself getting all the way to the summit. Now, what a lot of people don't know is when I was taking on Everest a couple of years ago, my goal actually was to go climb Mount Everest and then come down and in the there's a saddle kind of at 26,500 feet, which is the high camp, and you can go back up and climb the fourth highest mountain in the world called Lhotse,
Yeah.
and I was not able to do that. I was so out of my mind. I was so physically wasted. I was snowblind. I'd run out of oxygen. I had no juice at all.
Yeah.
And that's like we just talked about that envisioning success, which I did on Everest. Um, I also uh, could see that if I was going to take on Lhotse, that I would die 100%.
Yeah. And going to your podcast, what's the best what's the best episode you've ever had, and what's the best story you've ever told through your podcast, through your guests?
Well, that's hard for me to go back. I've had a lot of wonderful guests, and
Mhm.
I've had some amazing people on there. And when you do 300 episodes, there's a 300 conversations like you and I are having right now. So to go back and think about just one, it'd be hard for me to think about. But there's so many. There's my best friend Jim Mora, who's the head coach at Colorado State,
Mhm.
and he's just got so many pearls of wisdom. After having been in the NFL for 25 years and coached at UConn and taken them from nothing to something, coached at UCLA, become one of the winningest coaches of all time. I had another coach on, Chris Peterson, super successful here in the States. He was last coaching at the University of Washington. He stepped down
Yeah.
voluntarily. But just what a, built for life, his whole attitude, really trying to be a great leader and mentor to young kids. I've had the singer for the band Chicago on that
Mhm.
was just amazing in terms of his story. Like the guy, I mean, if you can imagine selling like 140 million albums, as the band, and then his solo success and how that happened. And it was so riveting. It was the first time he'd ever talk about the breakup of the band, and there was a documentary about the breakup of the band that featured me podcasting him on my show because it was the first time he'd ever talked about it publicly. And
Mhm.
so, that was amazing. I've had multiple people come on and, break down in tears and just because of the subject matter is so delicate and just getting them to talk about it. And I think my guest feeling being in a safe environment. And so, and then again, going back to what I said before, I took a year and a half break. And what I found is that I had all these really enriching conversations and different perspective and people coming from different, they're not all football players. They're
Yeah.
actresses, they were singers, they were just normal people. There were people that, there was a guy that he was a policeman that it was in a fiery car crash in Phoenix, Arizona, and burned 90% of his body, and
Mhm.
I mean, just awful things, right? And so it's just, and just incredible resilience from people who are overcoming these different challenges to really go on and better themselves. And that just helps me at the end of the day.
You mentioned that you mentioned about the frontman from Chicago talking about
Hmm.
something that he's never publicly talked about before. Is this the first? My sense is this is not the first time you've brought it out from your guest that something that they've never talked about, they suddenly talked about in your podcast. Um,
Yeah.
my bet is this is not the first time it's happened. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've done this. The guy that we're talking about is Peter
Yes.
Cetera. He was the front
Yes.
man. Yeah. And Mara Hemingway, others like that, talk about her dad here
Hmm.
in the States. Ernest Hemingway is one of
Yes.
America's most famous writers, and he committed suicide here in Sun Valley, where I live, Idaho. And there's been 5 suicides in her family. So for her to talk about
Yeah.
that very delicate subject, was
Hmm.
really difficult, and it was amazing. But I think one of the things that I do is I just keep asking why,
Yeah.
or how, right? Like that's really interesting. Well, how did you survive that, Mariel? How did you make that work? And that I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody else that's out
Yeah.
there, but I think, by really sitting in, listening to what they're asking or
Hmm.
saying, and then me just my curious mind and not being afraid to ask really sensitive, hard questions in a very kind way, just to find out what their answer might be, has also led to, people being very vulnerable in a
Yeah.
way that they're willing to share things that maybe they haven't shared before with somebody else.
And there is strength in vulnerability.
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't figure that out till I was 50 years old.
Hmm.
It took me half my life to figure that out.
um, did you retire from the NFL because of burnout, and then you decided you want to detour to something else in your life? Was it because of burnout or a
Yeah,
combination of?
look, I would love to, I know because I've seen them. I've actually seen them play, ironically, in Hong Kong, the New Zealand All Black team. And the NFL, probably like the All Black team, is almost impossible to do and impossible to make.
Yeah.
And I would love to tell you that I walked away on my own terms and, I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame and all these things. But that wasn't the case. I was more or less thrown out. I had my time, I got cut, and then it was time to move on. And the NFL doesn't need anybody. The brand is bigger than any one person. And, there's just also times at some point where there was
Yeah.
that year, the year that I retired at 29 years old, or I would have made it 35, it wouldn't have, I mean, this day was going to come one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just felt like I was super blessed to be able to extend that from college, which, most people don't even get into college. And I was able to do that and play at a high level and good things happen
Hmm.
there. And then move on to the NFL, which almost nobody makes less than 1% and play there. And now I'm sitting here with a pension, which is great from the
Hmm.
NFL. I'm part of that club. And it's just been one of those blessings I would have done for free,
Yeah.
and fortunately I got paid for it. Not like today, but yeah, it was wonderful. And I know I wish I would have played longer, but I didn't.
Do you still follow the game?
Yeah, I mean, I follow it. I do. I follow. Generally speaking, I'm always in tune with what's going on. I
Yeah.
like my university, University of Washington, and the Raiders in now Las Vegas. They have me down there every year to play in a golf tournament, and also attend these different alumni events, which is really super rewarding. I'll go back there again this year. It's just always. I don't know. It's just I love staying connected to sports. Obviously, running Sports Illustrated and running team sites. I have to be in tune with what's going on and who are the stars and working with capitalize on certain stories to create those spikes in viewership and things like that. So there's kind of a whole bunch of things in there that just my general interest to a business side that have me connected to the game.
Now, Mark, I want you to wear your NFL analyst hat on for just a few minutes. You know,
Sure.
the draft recently concluded, and along with the draft, there's trades and players getting waived and all that. Who do you like as of right now? Who do you like coming to this coming season? Who do you think has a really chance to do something special?
When you start talking about special, the one thing that people don't always understand is the margin, generally speaking, unless you're a really awful team, which there's not many awful teams, because the level of talent is so high, the margin typically is super thin. Like, you take a look at the point spreads, and they're usually the margins like, this team is going to beat that team by 2 points or
Yeah,
1 point or three. It's not like 20 points, right? So I think, keeping the level of consistency, my hometown is Seattle. The Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl this last year, but there's also a lot that's involved in there. I think San Francisco keeps coming super close, super talented team. The Raiders, which is kind of like, I feel like most akin to, because that's who drafted me
yeah,
and that's where I am. They have Fernando Menendez, and
yes.
they've got other players, but, that's going to be a build in progress. And so, I'm really hoping they can get away from all these mistakes that they've had in the years past and kind of elevate themselves in the mid of the pack somewhere and just show gains on where they need to go. I can't believe, we still you go back to Buffalo with their quarterback back there. Now they finally made a change at head coach. I don't know if that's going to make a difference
Yeah.
or not. It was surprising, but that's they're right there. They've had like this New England Patriots have had a resurgence again, another young quarterback, but so much of this has to do with who is calling the signals and that player. That's number one. That is the general of the team. And if that guy goes down or if he's not playing well, your team's not going to do well. The Raiders last year, their quarterback threw way too many, interceptions. And
Yeah.
so you can't win games if you're turning the ball over. And that usually gets down to, point margin and things like that that we talked about.
At the time you were playing in the NFL, what do the players have now that you wish you had when you were still playing?
Boy, there's a lot in there. I mean, I wouldn't say had, but there's just the system has changed so much.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a couple of examples. Number one, like even like this is a simple thing, but even like the uniforms have been they're way tighter and cut more to your body shape and not like these gigantic shoulder pads out here. And so just from the standpoint of the gear that you're running with down, because it's all about speed and quickness
Yeah.
and yet you want to be somewhat protected, but just enough so that you don't get hurt. I think they've done a great job, a lot better job on the AstroTurf. That's the fake grass that's out there in most of the
Yeah.
stadiums where they've really layered that up. So it used to just be really tight carpet, and now it's more like grassy type material with a much thicker foam underneath. So it's just a lot easier to fall on. People aren't getting hurt or blowing out their knees like they used to. In terms of the training camps, um, we would go 6 weeks with two-a-days and full blown pads morning and afternoon, and it was a grind. I
Yeah.
mean, it was a grind, and now they've got all these new rules around. Um, you can only be in pads like 1 day a week, and
Yeah.
you can't do 2 days, and even the off season workouts they call them the OTAs, and those are limited. Like you can't you're not required to be there year round, 365 days of the year. There's just certain times, and there's times when they can't talk to you and you can't be around and things like that. And so I just think really trying to protect the player's health in a lot better way. There's been all this helmet
Yeah.
um, um, studies and a better product made for concussions. I don't know how many I had. I had a bunch, but from technology and what you're wearing on your feet to your head to your shoulder pads to the actual uniform that's on you to the way they practice to the protocols to all these different things.
Mhm.
The game has completely changed, from the way it was when I was playing. I was certainly, still part of that old school group, which means I'm old.
Um, you mentioned about watching the All Blacks and watching rugby. What are the similarities between football and rugby, and how how do you think you would be able to, if you played rugby, how do you think you would be able to perform or play?
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody, it's easy to make conclusions when you're just looking at this sport over here or this sport over there, right? Not combined, because I think it changes. Because if you would take one of those All Blacks and put them on a NFL team,
Hmm.
maybe they don't have the right kind of agility just because they didn't grow up with that. Not that they couldn't do it, but they're big, strong, physical guys, super strong.
Yeah.
And if I were out there, I'd want to run like hell so none of those big guys would tackle me, right? And so I think like if I'd grown up with rugby, I would learn, you kind of learn how to hit like a different way. Like you're not going necessarily head on, but maybe just off the
Hmm.
shoulder from what I remember in Hong Kong. I think it was called the Sixes or something. Does that
Yes,
sound
yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
That's
It
yeah.
was a big tournament. It was I couldn't believe, what I was seeing. Those guys are definitely tough. So the mindset is certainly there. And it's also what they grew up with. Just like my mindset, I started playing when I was 6 or 7 years old with a football in my hand, uh, learning how to throw and catch and run from the time I was a little kid. And so it's just kind of what you grew up with. But certainly there's a lot of NFL players that you could probably play uh, with, a lifetime of experience like like those old black guys
Yeah.
have. Just like the old black guys, there's probably plenty of those guys. So they're big, that would make amazing, tackles and guards and, offensive linemen. But what you never see really is the crossover. You don't see NFL players they jumping in the fray to go be on the All
Hmm.
Black team. And you don't see any of the All Black as tough and amazing and resilient and gritty. And like this is the exact guy you'd want in a bar fight with you behind you. You don't see them in the NFL. It's
Hmm.
hard, right? And it's just that now you're getting away from the physical aspect to it to the agility and the actual skill set of learning that and going both ways, not just just to the NFL, going from NFL to go play professional rugby.
Now let's go to the Emmy Award. You won an Emmy Award for your documentary
Yeah.
searching the summit. 4 years.
Searching for the summit. There it
Yes, there
is.
you go. Searching for the summit. And
Yeah.
did did this broaden your horizons, create more opportunities for you? Did this add to your credibility? So you're not only a podcaster, conqueror of 7 summits, but you're also an Emmy Award winner.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say this is that I'm so busy. My mind is so busy thinking about the next thing and what I'm chasing. I never really sit and think about how great I am, and I'm jokingly when I say that, I don't think, oh, like, wow, it's just like it was really a out of body experience. It's something obviously I had to go personally do. I did most of the filming up on Mount Everest. We were nominated for Best Cinematography. I did not win that. We did win Best Picture, which is the biggest award.
Mhm.
And that whole night was like it was like I was in some made up dream. I mean, I kind of tend to think about my life as being impossible, right? Making the impossible possible. And how do you do that? And I credit a lot of, I mean, I'm the one who had to go do this, and I had this really powerful story. But at the end of the day, who put that together was the NFL. NFL films historically are just masters at storytelling
Yeah.
and putting these things together. And so, as much credit as I'd like to take for that, which I was the main actor, I guess, but it was their storytelling ability that created that Emmy win for me. So I just want to make sure that I'm giving credit where credit is due because you know, s- without that NFL partnership and them coming to me saying we want to do this film, uh, I probably wouldn't be sitting here with the Emmy Award.
I want to ask you this, Mark. You spent 5 years in college football, and
Mm.
I'm sure you follow the NIL situation and all that. I want to get your thoughts on that one. NIL in college football,
Yeah.
is it causing a lot of coaches to leave the league, leave the game?
Yeah. I think for some it is, yeah. You know, you probably had that with Nick Saban, who's the Alabama
Yeah,
coach. He probably drove him out of the game, and there's others who are just fed up with it. I'm seeing some of this in basketball, just like, you know what, I'm out. And the NCAA, which is a governing body that kind of oversees the whole
mhm,
college thing, even back in my day, they were so punitive and so restrictive that if my scholarship check was hardly anything to cover all the rent, all the board, and just to try to live on that, and on top of that, they restricted you from working. You could not
yeah,
hold another job while you're in school. You're banned from doing that. And so, they've got nobody but themselves to blame. It's now got to the point where, like, I would love to go back today and play college football, and who knows what my value would be. But, some of these kids are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions.
yeah,
And it's almost like, stay in college as long as you possibly can. NFL is so difficult, and it might be a one and done where you can be the star and make a whole lot of money, and so it just is what it is, and it's the Wild
yeah,
West, and something is going to change. I don't know what changes. I don't know how it changes, but right now, the schools like Indiana last year who never won anything, who can buck up and pay and just buy your players and bring them in. It's
yeah,
basically a professional football team or a basketball team, that are out there. So it's just a weird day and age. There's no loyalty because everybody's chasing the dollar, and I probably would too. But I would say this on the other side of that is uh, my first 3 years at the University of Washington were probably the toughest, years of my life. And I was in a lot of, I had a lot of dark days. It was hard. It was tough. And if I would have had the opportunity to
yeah,
jump around and like after one year, I'm like, I don't like this anymore because I'm not playing. So I'm gone. And somebody's going to pay me, 50 grand on top of that. I'm going to go play at this school. I don't know if I would not have done that. And so for me, this, the name of the title of this book, Finding Your Summit, available on Amazon, no plug, is
Okay.
how to build resilience and faith to rise above life's challenges. And it was hard, like relative to my little life back then. Like my whole world was just trying to get on the field and how to get bigger, faster, stronger. There's a lot of things I just had to learn, and it didn't matter where I would have gone. If I would have played earlier and maybe had some success, I don't know if I would have built up that resilience and strength and faith that I needed,
Mhm.
that I developed because I hung in there for 3 years before I finally got my chance and my break.
Okay, final question, Mark. I know you're very busy.
Yeah.
Is there Will there be an eighth summit? I mean, you've conquered every summit on every continent.
Mhm.
Will there be an eighth summit? Is there an eighth summit in your future?
There's about 100 more summits. And, right after, in the same year of 2021 that I climbed Mount Everest, I went down to Ecuador and climbed uh, Cotopaxi. And then
Mhm.
the next year, I went off and climbed Mount Blanc in France. And then I climbed the Matterhorn, which is wicked scary, in Switzerland. The year after that, which is 2 years ago, I climbed the Eiger. Last year, I went to the Dolomites. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to Montenegro, which
Mhm.
is part of the old Yugoslavia next door to, yeah. Um, so I'm going there to climb. And I live in a very mountainous, I live like sort of like Queenstown down in the South Island there in New Zealand.
Mhm.
And I live in this, which is called Sun Valley here, Sun Valley, Idaho. So I climb every day. I'll climb this afternoon. And it's just part of my life now. And I enjoy that. I do in my book, I do call my Ace Summit Sports Illustrated, because that was literally, again, like you said, going from zero to a billion page views and taking the company from number 17 to number one past ESPN.
Right.
That was a just a gigantic hurdle. Now, SI is not there now, and I left Sports Illustrated 6 months ago, but that's what I considered almost my ace summit. And then all these other mountains are just more experiences. I might be going into Tibet next year, which will be fascinating. So all these adventures are out there and around the corner. And I have just I've grown so much from them. I've learned so much.
And on that note, Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Been a pleasure, been an honor, and best of luck on all the other summits, your podcast, and maybe another Emmy Award.
Let's hope. Let's go, man. I'm ready. Let's shoot one together down New Zealand.
All right, folks, that's all the time we have on today's special episode of Sports for All. We just had Mark Pattinson, Emmy Award winner, seven summit conqueror, and a former NFL player. And until the next episode of Sports for All, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. So long.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Are we good?
Yes, we